Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the Life Divine. We are in the chapter Supermind, Mind, and the Overmind Maya, as always with our beloved Ranga. Beginning with the paragraph, which we have already read last time, and will discuss this time, and still we can recognize at once in the Overmind the original cosmic Maya.
Before we read this para, a small reminder of what we have read earlier, that the overmind consciousness is the highest plane of existence, consciousness, whatever you want, because they are all the same, at the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay. Above the supermind, above the overmind, you go into totally a different level. That's a third level, which is very different from the field of the ignorance. So, just to repeat again, to make it clear to ourselves, we can talk of three levels. The first level is the matter, life and mind. Here we are in ignorance, and the sign of ignorance is that we don't see the reality, we see only the appearances, the outer forms of things, and we see multiplicity. We don't see the oneness of things. We see only huge number of the many. We continue to see the many. We don't see their oneness. You make your mind silent and go to the second level, which are the spiritual planes of consciousness. That's not a plane of ignorance as such. There is ignorance lingering, but it is not ignorance as in the lower first level. Here, you start seeing the oneness of things. And yet, there are four. From those principles, there are four levels: higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, and overmind. So, overmind is the highest plane in the spiritual planes of consciousness, and the lingering of ignorance is still present in the overmind. So, he said that in the overmind, we still are in ignorance, because total knowledge is not yet there. There is a lot of knowledge in the overmind, but it is still a field of ignorance. That's important because he uses the word still in the next para. Now, he has said that the overmind is a shadow or a representative of the supermind. Whatever is there in the supermind, you can find glimpses and hints of it in the overmind, but it is not yet the overmind. It's a sort of delegated supermind, he says. You can think of an ambassador in a country. He represents a country, but he doesn't have the powers of the original government. So it is something like that. The overmind is an ambassador, you can say, in the ignorance of the supermind. But it is sufficient connection there with them so that he can be taken as the ambassador. His word is taken as part of the government from where he comes. So exactly here also, the overmind is a representation and a figure of the supermind, and many truths are reflected in the overmind. So this we keep in mind, in our mind. Now, when you go to the supramental level, you start seeing the oneness, but you also see the many. You see the entire range of the existence. With this, I'll start reading now the...
One question.
Yeah.
Did you tell us last week or week before that in the overmind consciousness there is duality, but not clashing of duality?
That's right. That starts even at the spiritual planes of consciousness. You don't start seeing the dualities even in the spiritual planes of consciousness. You start seeing the complementarities. They are not opposites. You see the dualities, but light and shade are not opposites. Okay? Cruelty and kindness are not opposites. They are the same vibrational quality, but at two poles.
Even in the higher mind?
Yeah, higher mind, element mind, you see the oneness of both. You don't see the dualities anymore. You don't see the dualities. That's why when you go into the higher spiritual planes of consciousness, which is level 2, you go beyond sin and good and bad, morality. You go beyond morality. Good and evil are not anymore incompatible with each other as in the physical world. They are quite compatible. I think I'll give an example which I found was quite interesting, so you will understand how they can be complementary and not opposites. Okay? Those who know science will understand this very much, but even then we can understand. Take light, okay? Take any light, any one color. It has got a vibrational quality. It vibrates. So when it vibrates, let us say 50, and it's usually measured in megahertz, okay? So suppose you have, I'm making a supposition, that red light has a vibrational quality of 50 megahertz. But that means it vibrates 50 times in 1 second. Okay? Now, suppose I keep the same vibrational level, but instead of moving it in 5 centimeters gap, I go to 10 centimeters gap. The vibration is still the same, but the quality will change. So, this is what happens in the spiritual planes of consciousness. The vibrational quality remains the same, but its character has changed. It will become blue light or violet light or whatever.
From the point of music, it's easily understandable.
Yes, also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because everything is vibration in music.
Yes.
And it's mathematical also.
So, the basic vibrational quality in evil and good remains the same. But you see them as opposites because quantitatively they are different, qualitatively they are the same.
Excellent.
Okay? So, that is what happens in the spiritual planes of consciousness. They are not, the dualities are not opposites. But at the highest level of consciousness, you don't even see the complementarities. They become completely compatible with each other at the highest supramental level. So, with this, we now come to the para that we have to read. So, he has told you that overmind is still a field of ignorance, although much less and not like the level 1. Now, Srimdu is saying, and still we can recognize at once in the overmind the original cosmic Maya, not a Maya of ignorance, but a Maya of knowledge, yet a power which has made the ignorance possible, even inevitable. So we'll have to discuss a little bit of what is the original Maya and the Maya of ignorance. Okay? Again, I remind you that if you know the gradations, they are very, very important to remember the gradations. Okay? At the highest level, total oneness. At the lower levels, this oneness starts becoming more and more and more the many. Okay? The highest level, subtle. But as it keeps coming down, it becomes more and more gross and more material and dense. So, the same principle applies to Maya. So everything being the same, still its quality changes when you go from one level to another level. Again, you can use the image of the ice, water vapor. The same thing and yet taking different forms. Essentially the same. So now Maya at the highest level in the spiritual planes, in supermind, when you experience Maya, you see that it is the power of the divine to make real forms. When you go there, you see that everything that he has made in the physical world is real. It's not unreal. Okay?
And
that's the original Maya.
That's why it has made ignorance possible and inevitable? Maya?
I'll come to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come to that. Now, but when you bring Maya down into the lower levels, its character starts changing. Okay? Now, even if you think about it, what is the divine doing? He is taking a substance and creating absolutely the grossest of forms. If you really start thinking about it, you'll see what is Maya. Maya is the power, something that deludes you, that you can't understand. Take, for instance, any plant. Okay, you will appreciate this. out of mud, you are producing beautiful roses, beautiful lilies. Can you do that? You can't. But he is doing it. So, the sweetest of fruits from mud. This is Maya. The unbelievable. So, this is at the highest level, these forms that he is creating is real. But as you come to the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness, you have a tendency to see them as unreal. Okay? And again, when you come down to the last level, in the ignorance field, you see all these things as real. This is real to me, I can touch it, I can do what I want with it, my body is real, this table is real. I go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, this is no more real as it was in my old consciousness. It is only an outer form. The reality is not there. If I look at you, in my ignorance, I am seeing only your outer body. And there are features. I see that you are this height, this color, you have a beard. This is what I see is very real to me. But when I go to the spiritual level of consciousness, I find that this is only an outer shell. The reality is your soul. I start seeing that. And I recognize that your body, mind, life is an outer appearance. That's why Srimda used the word appearance.
At what level of the mind do you see that?
Spiritual planes of consciousness, level 2.
Even higher mind.
Yes. Higher mind also you start seeing the complementarities, and also, in fact, that's what happens when Srimda had the experience of the silent mind. He went into the higher mind first. That is the lowest. Higher mind is the lowest in the spiritual planes of consciousness, the highest from the ignorance. And it is the overmind is the highest plane in the spiritual planes of consciousness. So, when you are in that, you start seeing things in a different way. You start seeing the physical world as unreal. Why is that? Because that also needs a little bit of a discussion. We'll do that. And I'll give you 2 examples by which you will understand that, okay? It's possible to see the same thing in the physical world in 2 different ways. Okay? One is a very simple example. I keep a rod, a pencil at your eye level. You will see only a point. You will see only this. But if I tilt it, you will see a line. The thing has not changed, but your view of things has changed. How come? Because your senses are defective and they give you not a complete picture. That's the reason. There is another way of looking at it also, which is interesting. We have discussed it, but still it's worth discussing so that it settles in the mind. You experience the physical world through your senses. If your senses are not there, the world will not exist for you. Right? So, and is that the only thing? No. The senses are connected to the brain through nerves. So the data which the senses are collecting, whether it be sound or whether it be a scene or whether it be a touch or a smell or a taste, these data, sense data, are collected and sent to the brain. And the brain is telling you what you are seeing and what you are not seeing. You are not seeing this. You are seeing an image in your brain. And yet you think that this is what I am seeing. What is the proof? If you are blind, you don't see it. Then, if the nerve gets damaged, you won't see. The thing is there. The eye is functioning, but the nerve, optic nerve is damaged, you are blind. Then we come to the third level. What about the mind interpreting? If the mind goes silent, it stops interpreting. So you see only the sense data, which seems to be unreal, unsubstantial. So even biologically you can explain that. Okay? So that's when you make your mind silent and you go to the higher level, you see physical things as unreal. Okay? So 3 levels. The physical world is real to me. The physical world is unreal to me in the second level. The physical world is real, but it is real in time and space. Not permanent reality. Permanent reality only at the highest level. The reality of your body is in time and space. So it's a practical reality, and that is the essential reality which lasts forever. Now apply this to Maya. Okay? Maya at the highest level is the real power of the divine to create forms which are real. You come down to the spiritual levels of consciousness, Maya becomes an illusion maker. Okay? So, and you come down to the third level of the physical world, again, Maya is still there. As I said, the most magnificent flowers, the most sweetest of fruits, everything is being created from mud. You can't do that. So that's a power of the divine to create this. It's a miracle.
I've often spoken to you about the wars and the killing of millions of people.
Yeah.
And you told me that only when one sees it at a higher level
Yes.
can one understand it.
Yes. Because that you raised that question of the Nazi killings one day. I remember.
Right.
So my explanation for that would be this. Okay. When you are in the physical world, you see the dualities. You see a soft breeze and a hard cyclonic wind as opposites. One is sweet and the other is cruel and destructive. But when you go to the level of the spiritual plane of consciousness, it is still essentially wind. So there is no difference between a cyclone and a soft breeze. So apply that to cruelty and gentleness. Okay, same thing. It is force, essentially. So force can be very gentle. If I stroke you gently with it is force. But if I give you a slap, it is force. That's what you say when you go to the spiritual levels of consciousness. So at that level, these things don't exist.
Even though they are people?
Yes. People are only part of the whole system. People, trees, everything is only part of the whole system. But the cruelty and all that is absolutely valid at our level. We can't mix up the two values. Values go on changing as you keep going higher and higher. Values go on changing. That's important. Another way of explaining these values is this. Okay, I am seeing the sun rising in the east. It is real to me. The sun is moving. Okay, it's my sense level. It's my sense knowledge. My senses are telling me that this is. Now enters the mind, enters science, which uses logic and it analyzes things and says, that's an illusion. The sun is not rising at all. It's the earth is moving around. Values have changed. So when you go from one level to another level, values keep changing. Okay?
Thank you.
So, same thing you apply to Maya now. Okay? So, Maya at the highest level is the power of the divine to make real forms. That is the original cosmic Maya. Not a Maya of ignorance. The Maya of ignorance is creation of unreal forms. Okay? Clear? But a Maya of knowledge. You see, Maya is the word Maya in Sanskrit is comes from the same Sanskrit root ma, to measure. Okay? We have the word in all the Indian languages, mapa. Okay? It means that there is a measure. And when you talk of measure, there is limitation. So, when you make forms, the infinite becomes finite forms. So, these infinite forms are real. It's not unreal. It's like a huge amount of clay you have which is infinite. And if I want to make pots and pans, I take a little bit and make a form. The clay itself, infinite, has no form. Formless. But I take one. So, manifestation implies form. Form implies limitation. And limitation makes the problem of the seeming imperfection. So this is the way you have to see it. So here he's saying, not a Maya of ignorance, but a Maya of knowledge. And now he's saying again, yet a power which has made the ignorance possible. Okay? Power also at the highest level is supreme power. But when it keeps coming down, that power also changes its character and it makes possible the ignorance. Your power goes down. What you apply to Maya, you can apply also to power. That's what he's saying. So it's clear now? Two Mayas. Yet a power which has made the ignorance possible, even inevitable. If you remember, he used those Latin phrase, facilis descendus, something like that. I can't pronounce the Latin words, but that's what it means. Easy, facile descent. Okay? So that's why inevitable. Okay? So, now we go to the next sentence. For if each principle loosed into action must follow its independent line and carry out its complete consequences, the principle of separation must also be allowed its complete course and arrive at its absolute consequence. We'll stop here. So he's saying that each principle, you remember he has told you in the previous para that the overmind consciousness is already the field of the many, and each of the many is given the right to express itself fully in any way it wants. It has the freedom to express itself.
Even negativity.
Yes, inevitably. So that's what he's saying in this sentence. For if each principle loosed into action, now look at that, it's very interesting, the word. Okay? Yes. It is loosed into action. Do what you want. It is loosed into action. Okay? Sometimes they use the word also ooze. Because the word srij in Sanskrit also means that. A flowing and a creation at the same time. So loosed into action must follow its independent line and carry out its complete consequences. So carry out complete consequences, total dualities and oppositions and infinite forms. Follow its independent line and carry out its complete consequences. The principle of separation must also be allowed its complete course and arrive at its absolute consequence. The absolute consequence is the creation of total separation, which is the many, which is the multiplicity. Okay? So he says, follows till it enters by obscuring infinitesimal fragmentation. Now, 3 words. Obscuring. Infinitesimal fragmentation. Infinitesimal, the smallest infinite. Infinitesimal, smallest. Then, fragmentation. The breaking up into absolute smallest atoms. Okay? Now, that's an interesting thing also. Does this fragmentation and infinitesimal, is there a limit at which it stops? If the highest is infinite, then this also has to be infinite. So my own guess is, many people won't agree perhaps, but you can never come to the smallest particle. In science, they thought first the atom is the smallest thing that can exist. In Greek period also, the atom idea was there, even in our Indian philosophy. Now they have discovered that the atom is not the last. There are all sorts of other particles inside. Okay? So now this particle, that particle, boson and this and that, so many different types of particles. Now they are trying to find the last particle in Switzerland. You know that, no? CERN. Center for European Research in Nuclear Science, and it's a 27-kilometer long tunnel under the Alps, and they are trying to find the last particle. My humble forecast is that they will never find it. Because there's no end to it. It goes on and on and on. Another way of looking at it is very interesting also. Okay? You start with a picture. If I want to reproduce a picture, I have to break it down into pixels. That's clear? Because if I want to reproduce a picture, okay, you have a continuous tone photograph, but if you want to print it, you have to use pixels. Now, the pixels can be, let us say, 100 dots per inch. You may sometimes even see the dots. Now, if you put 200 dots per inch, the picture becomes much smoother, and this is what you call in TV technology and even in your printing and all that, high definition. There is no more. So, make the pixels smaller, 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 smaller. What do you end up with? You end up with the same picture. But smooth. So that's what he also says, Srimdo says in elsewhere. I am putting it in different words. But he says that if you go on making smaller, 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 you end up with what you started with.
So, for example, pi. You never come to an end with pi. It's
You mean the number
point,
3.2?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So what about that?
Well, if you reduce it to the smallest particle, then you come to the, you just said you come to the essence of it.
But how can you reduce pi?
I don't think you can.
Oh, you mean the infinite series?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know exactly what the point is, but anyway, so this is what he's saying. So tuchena is a Sanskrit word. It becomes the smallest, the least particle. Okay? So it enters by obscuring infinitesimal fragmentation, tuchena. Tucha is absolutely insignificant, smallest particle. So, in fact, there is a footnote. What is that footnote? Let's see. Oh, Rigveda. It's from the Rigveda. So, into the material inconscience. So, we discussed that the consciousness is also full consciousness, inconscient. So, that's why he is using the word obscuring. If you remember that Satchidananda is the one that creates the world, Sat Chit Shakti Ananda, all of them start becoming gross and limited. So light, also consciousness becomes unconsciousness, power becomes incapacity, Ananda becomes pain, pleasure and indifference. So at the lowest level. So that's what he's saying. So into the material inconscience. The inconscient ocean of the Rig Veda, and if the one is born from that by its own greatness, it is still at first concealed by a fragmentary, separative existence and consciousness which is ours, the normal human mind, okay? And in which we have to piece together things to arrive at a whole. This is the nature of the human being, the human mind. It is analytical, it is not synthetical. When you go into the spiritual planes of consciousness, you have a synthetic capacity. But the total synthesis can only happen at the third level. So, he's saying that when this Maya creates these forms, at the lowest level it becomes inconsciousness and tuchena, the many. Okay?
But I have a question here because Sri Aurobindo capitalizes the zero in one. And if the one is born,
Yeah.
I took that as an avatar or a vibhuti.
An
If that
avatar is the divine consciousness in the world.
Right.
But the one that he is talking about is the highest level of the divine, Purushottama, Ishvara. The divine who is personal as well as impersonal. He is not referring to the avatar here. Okay? So, the one is born by its own greatness. It is still at first concealed by a fragmentary separative existence and consciousness which is ours. Okay? The highest divine plunges himself into the darkness of the material inconscience, and even when he comes up, okay, he's saying this is a consciousness which is ours and in which we have to piece things together to arrive at a whole. He's talking of our mind, so here also he's talking of the human mind. The human mind is analytical. It has to collect things, put together and try and understand. But this is a collection and a combination of various things. It's not a synthesis. It's a placing together of all things together. Okay? So, to arrive at a whole. In that slow and difficult emergence, a certain semblance of truth is given to the dictum of Heraclitus that war is the father of all things. For each idea, force, separate consciousness, living being, by the very necessity of its ignorance, enters into collision with others and tries to live and grow and fulfill itself by independent self-assertion, not by harmony with the rest of existence. So, he is describing the inevitability of clash in the dualities here. How can a cruel man and a kind man be in harmony? It can't. You can't have a strong force and a weak force in harmony. Not possible. At the higher levels, possible, but not in the physical world. So, Heraclitus says that war is the father of all things here. In other words, there is a clash, and that clash produces some sort of higher principles, and it goes on. So, father is what's he saying? Is the father of all things. Okay, so in fact, Heraclitus has got a whole small booklet on him, and he was in Greece himself. Who knows he was Heraclitus or not? We don't know. He was in ancient Greece, he says, at one time. So, Heraclitus at war. And it's interesting because Heraclitus, I read the book, he says that fire is the ultimate principle. Now that's interesting because you have you have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. That's a gradation. So Heraclitus talks of fire as the original principle. That means he has not gone to the highest level. Okay, so Heraclitus, the war is the father of all things. For each idea, force, separate consciousness, living being by the very necessity of its ignorance, enters into collision with others and tries to live and grow and fulfill itself by independent self-assertion. That's where ego comes in. Independent self-assertion, you can replace the word by ego. Not by harmony with the rest of existence. Yet, there is still the unknown underlying oneness which compels us to strive slowly towards some form of harmony, of interdependence, of concording, of discords, of a difficult unity. Now that's very interesting because in the synthesis he has got a whole chapter on this. That the divine is there behind and guiding it. The oneness is there, but you can see it in some way, but you can't see the reality, but you can imagine it. Take any species, okay? Take the horses, for instance, okay? There is something called horseness. You have to, if you see an animal, you say, okay, this is a horse, it's not a cat. So there is something called horse. That is a unity. That's the oneness hiding behind the species of the many. Each horse is different, and yet there is a common element to them. That's the oneness hiding behind the outer forms.
I think Mother in some place calls it the genius of the species. The genius of the species.
Yes. So the oneness is there in everything. Okay, that's what he's saying. All human beings, there is a oneness hiding behind. So that oneness is goading you, pushing you, impelling you towards harmony. That's what Swami is saying. Okay? Yet there is still the unknown underlying oneness which compels us to strive slowly towards some form of harmony, not total harmony, of interdependence, of concording, of discords, of a difficult unity. Some sort of unity comes up, but it's not the real unity. Okay? So, some form of harmony and interdependence of concording of discords. This question has been discussed very well in synthesis, standards of conduct. This concord, and that is there very much. I won't go into that because that's another subject altogether. But this question of difference, then there is a attempt at oneness, then there are morality, and then finally there is a spiritual plane of consciousness where unity is real. He says that very clearly about the French Revolution's 3 ideals: liberté, égalité, fraternité. Is all these equality, fraternity, and brotherhood, what's that? Equality. Equality, equality, possible in the physical world? No. See, from the point of view of anything you take, okay, equality is not achieved in the physical world at all. Okay, neither is fraternity allowed. It can't operate because fraternity is something that you Emotionally, you make a tie and say, let's all be harmonious and brothers. This is a compact, it's a treaty. It's a mentally formed thing. It's not the reality. Okay? So this, but it's a subject altogether different, so we won't go into that. Okay? Interdependence of concording and discords. Our difficulty, unity is there, but it's very difficult. Now take what's happening in Russia and NATO. Is a concord. Okay? But are they being able to operate? They are absolutely stuck. They don't know what to do now with this situation in Russia and Ukraine. NATO has simply, they are puzzled. So, difficult unity. There is a unity in NATO, but there is difficult. Okay, we go to the next one. But it is only by the evolution in us of a concealed superconscious powers of cosmic truth and of the reality in which they are one, that the harmony and unity we strive for can be dynamically realized in the very fiber of our being and all its self-expression, and not merely in imperfect attempts, incomplete constructions, ever-changing approximations. He's saying something very clear here. He's saying that so long as you are in the mental consciousness, you make an attempt at concord of discords. Okay, that's why there are treaties all over. There used to be NATO treaties still there. CENTO, SEATO, all sorts of pacts. When Bangladesh problem came up, India entered into a contract with the Russians. Okay, so there's an understanding. After some time it breaks up. It doesn't work anymore. This is mentally constructed fraternity, but it does not work in the mental world. When you go to spiritual planes of consciousness, it can become real. At the physical level, fraternity is not possible. After a time, it breaks up. Okay, so so that's clear now what he's saying. Incomplete constructions. All attempts at unity is incomplete construction. Okay, take for instance any nation. Okay, take India. If among ourselves we are quarreling all the time. Okay, all the states are quarreling, everybody is quarreling. But if China attacks, we'll all feel one. But how long is that going to last? It's only a temporary thing. That's why I'm using the word incomplete construction, ever-changing approximations. So clear. Okay? The higher ranges of spiritual mind have to open. So, you have to go to the spiritual mind to get the real oneness. Why? Because in the spiritual planes of consciousness, cosmic consciousness is possible. Not here, at this level, no. But in the spiritual planes, cosmic consciousness is possible. And what is cosmic consciousness? Everybody is part of me and I am in everybody. So there is no difference and there is automatic harmony. But the one who is in that consciousness will have this sense of fraternity, not the others. So if a community is there who are all experiencing the same thing, then a superior race can be created. Because all of them would be at the same. That is the reason why Mother has created Auroville and Ashram. A collectivity, not individual, collectivity. Okay? So, the higher mind, range of spiritual mind, have to open upon our being and consciousness, and also that which is beyond spiritual mind. So, what is beyond spiritual mind? The third level, the supramental. So, spiritual mind is the second level. First level, our body, mind, life. Ignorance. Second level, spiritual mind. Third level, beyond this super mind. Okay? Must appear in us if we are to fulfill the divine possibility of our birth in the cosmic existence.
Oh,
He is not being very specific, but he's saying, what are we to? The divine possibility of our birth is what? Immortality, divinity in the physical world. The divinization of the human body itself. He's not saying that, he left it a little vague. Okay? So that is what he's saying. So now, so what I'll do, I'll just summarize what we have read just now. Okay? so that it stays in the mind. In the overmind consciousness, we recognize the origin of Maya, which is a creative power. Here, Maya is a power of knowledge and not ignorance. But since the overmind is the plane where all possibilities exist and each is given the full right to develop itself and manifest its uniqueness, it is obvious that the separation of the one into the many begins at the overmind level. Once separation is admitted, the natural consequence is the infinite fragmentation of the one into infinitesimal atoms in the inconscient. So, this is basically what he's saying. So, the one becomes the many. Overmind, in its descent, reaches a line which divides the cosmic truth from the cosmic ignorance. So, in its descent, when it is descending, what are the stages of descent? Overmind, intuitive mind, illumined mind, higher mind. These are the planes. It is descending. Overmind in its descent reaches a line which divides the cosmic truth from the cosmic ignorance. Which is that? The higher mind, okay? It is a line at which it becomes possible for consciousness force, emphasizing the separateness of each independent movement created by overmind and hiding or darkening their unity, to divide mind by overmind in its descent, reaches a line which divides the cosmic truth from the cosmic ignorance. It is a line at which it becomes possible for consciousness force, emphasizing the separateness of each. I told you that the first level is the many. The separateness is the many of each independent movement created by overmind and hiding or darkening their unity, to divide mind by an exclusive concentration from the overmental source. So, exclusive concentration is a separation. That consciousness which is one separates itself into the many. Okay? So, exclusive. Your consciousness is exclusive from mine. So, that is ignorance. The oneness is gone. Okay? There has already been a similar separation of overmind from its supramental source, but with a transparency in the veil which allows a conscious transmission and maintains a certain luminous kinship. This is interesting. He is saying that the many has already come into existence in the overmind level of consciousness, but there is a connection with the supermind. And what is that? Read that again carefully, you will see. Okay? He's saying there has already been a similar separation of overmind from its supramental source. The supramental source, oneness, and the overmind, the many. Okay? But with a transparency in the veil. So this is not an opaque veil that divides overmind and supermind, but it's a transparent veil. It's a veil, but transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So,
this luminous kinship, very beautiful.
yeah, that's right. Luminous kinship. In other words, there is a relation between the supermind and the overmind. Okay? But here means at the overmind and mind level, the higher mind and the mind level. At the higher level, there is a transparency in the dividing veil. But here, our mind and higher mind, totally opaque. Okay? So, we discussed that the light is there, it becomes very opaque here. So, that is very clear now. So, but here the veil is opaque, and the transmission of the overmind motives to the mind is occult. The word occult means hidden. It's not apparent. The word occult, usually we think of occultism. Okay? But the word occult actually means hidden.
I have definition from Sri Aurobindo in the lexicon, where he says occult is used in the West because they really don't understand it. But there's nothing occult to the Indian mind.
Yes.
It's just something hidden that has not yet been revealed.
Exactly. Hidden, secret. That's the meaning of occult. Okay? So, and obscure. Mind separated acts as if it were an independent principle. Which mind is he talking about? Our mind. The lowest mind has separated itself into individual minds as if it were an independent principle, and each mental being, each basic mental idea, power, force, stands similarly on its separate self. So not only consciousness becomes separate, but power also becomes separate, force also becomes separate. Your power is not my power. You can do something which I can't do. So consciousness is separate, power also is separate, even enjoyment is separate. Everything becomes separate. You may enjoy something which I don't enjoy. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Each basic mental idea, power, force stands similarly on its separate self. If it communicates or combines with or contacts others, it is not with the Catholic universality of the overmind movement on the basis of underlying oneness, but as independent units joining to form a separate constructed whole. So, if I have a difference of opinion with you, it's all right. That's normal. But if I try to have a harmony with you, it's a constructed harmony. It's not real. But in the spiritual planes of consciousness, a real harmony is possible. That's what he's saying. Okay? Now, separate, constructed, and that which is constructed can also be destroyed. That's the whole point. That's why he uses the word constructed. Okay? It is by this movement that we pass from the cosmic truth into the cosmic ignorance. So, the cosmic truth, higher mind, cosmic truth. Come down to the mind, ignorance. You start seeing the many, you have lost the reality of the thing. Okay, so the cosmic mind on this level, no doubt, comprehends its own unity, but it is not aware of its own source and foundation in the spirit. He is now talking of the second level, cosmic mind. The cosmic mind at the second level, spiritual planes of consciousness, it knows itself, but it doesn't know its source. That's the whole problem. Because so many people say the divine is not personal, is impersonal. They don't know from where they are coming. Okay? Buddhism, Mayavada, so many, Jiddu Krishnamurti, so many others say there is no personal God. But actually you are coming from that level. Okay? The cosmic mind on this level no doubt comprehends its own unity, but it is not aware of its source, own source and foundation in the spirit, and can only comprehend it by the intelligence, not in any enduring experience. There is a difference between a mental idea and an enduring experience. Okay, that's it. It acts in itself as if by its own right and works out what it receives as material without direct communication with the source from which it receives. Okay. Its units also act in ignorance of each other and of the cosmic whole, of each other and the cosmic whole, except for the knowledge that they can get by contact and communication. Contact and communication is possible through senses. Okay? The basic sense of identity and the mutual penetration and understanding that comes from it are no longer there. Now, that he's using an interesting word, penetration, mutual penetration. In the higher mind, in the spiritual planes of consciousness, cosmic consciousness is possible. So what's happening? My soul substance is mixing with your soul substance. Mutual penetration. You can replace the word mutual penetration by cosmic consciousness. Because you start seeing everybody as one. Actually, in another place he has mentioned also, my soul substance can mix with your soul substance. Okay? So, and understanding that comes from it are no longer there. All the actions of this mind energy proceed on the opposite basis of the ignorance and its divisions, and although they are the results of certain conscious knowledge, It's a partial knowledge, not a true and integral self-knowledge, not a true and integral world knowledge. So, integral self-knowledge, psychological knowledge. True and integral world knowledge, science. You know the inside and the outside. Okay? So, this character persists in life and in subtle matter and appears in the gross material universe, which arises in the final lapse into the inconscience.
Very good evening. Namaste all. Namaste.